Hi, I'm Malia, an artist and instructor at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, here with another Art in Action. Today we'll be creating t-shirt transformations. So for this project, we'll need a few things. First, we'll need 1 or 2 t-shirts. I have size extra large here. And depending on who's doing the project, you can size up or size down. Thread for sewing, a needle for sewing. This project can also be done with the sewing machine, so if you have that, you can use that at home. We'll need a little bit of chalk, a nice ruler, and a pair of sharp scissors that are good for cutting fabric. Did you know that 2 billion t-shirts are sold in the United States alone each year? We have a lot of t-shirts in our closet that we don't use anymore, but it's taken a lot of effort to get to this point of, growing and making and turning it into a shirt. So I decided that we can create a really cool scarf out of our previously worn t-shirts that give extra life into our favorite common possessions in our wardrobe. So we've got our t-shirt. Now, remember, this project can be done with 1 or 2 t-shirts. Just depends on the size of the scarf that you want to create and the size of the person who's wearing it. So I'm going to show you how to prep the fabric with our shirt. First thing we want to do is turn it so that it's inside out. And we want to cut off the sleeves. Now, you'll notice that there's a seam right here. What you're going to want to do is cut towards the body side. So here's the body of the fabric here. You're going to want to cut the sleeve off towards the body side like this. And we're going to want to keep it as smooth as we can. So you don't want to just chop off the entire sleeve at once because you might be cutting something off that you needed. So following that seam on the sleeve, I'm just trying to, as evenly as possible, as straight as possible, cut off the sleeve. And so I'm just rotating the fabric every so often to make sure that I'm just cutting off what I need. This will come into play a little bit later, so it's good to try to keep this as neat as possible. It's going to be fringy though, so some of this won't be as seen as you might think, but I always like to try to keep my work tidy when I'm cutting things apart. So after you've cut off your first sleeve, you're going to repeat this method on the second side, and you can add this to your scrap pile. Sometimes I'll use my extra cut fabric from t-shirts for rags around the house for cleaning. So now you'll have a sleeveless t-shirt. Amazing. What you want to do next is you want to look to the shoulder seams and the neck because that's what we're going to cut off right now. So you can start by cutting off, again, as straight as you can across the shoulder seam. And you'll cut away the neck portion as well. Again, following that seam that's just right there on the neck. Now I'm going around the back of the shirt here, and then I'm also going to be cutting off around the shoulder again on the other side of this tape here. It's just good to reduce the bulk. And if you have a shirt that does not have that tape and it's only a seam, then you'll want to trim that seam away as well. So on either side of this seam, you're going to want to cut out that extra bit there. All right. Finally, what you'll see is the bottom of your shirt here has the hem part, and we're going to want to trim that away too. I'm going to lay this like this here, and this is where you want to take some time to smooth out your t-shirt as much as possible. And try to get that as smooth as you can, because if you have any lumps on the bottom, it might end up being a little jagged, and you'd want to try to minimize that as much as you can. So what I'm seeing here is the bottom of the neck. I'm going to line up my ruler so that's just barely brushing that, and I'm going to draw a straight line with my chalk. So I've got my 2 layers together, they're even, there's no bubbling. I'm going to go through both of the layers, the front and the back, and I'm going to cut nice and straight right along this line. So if you want this to be a scarf for a small person, then one t-shirt that's extra large or bigger should do. If you're trying to make a scarf for an adult or someone who wants a little bit extra fringe, you're gonna wanna do the same thing with a second t-shirt. So you'll go through the same process. Then, if you're going to be using two t-shirts, which is what I'll show you today, you're going to want to cut one edge of each t-shirt open. So after you prep your fabric nice and smooth, you're gonna go through and you're gonna trim up this side seam and make sure it's as straight as you can get it. It's gonna make sewing a lot easier. So I'm just gonna slide the scissors through the two layers and I'm gonna trim that away nice and straight here like this. And then you'll notice that you've got your t-shirt. It's ready and open and ready to be transformed. And it'll look like this here. Okay, so for the longer t-shirt, you'll want to have two t-shirts just like this. So now we've trimmed this open so that we've got one side that's open and one side that's left closed. And what we want to do is, this is going to get sewn to the second t-shirt, right? So we want to prep this area where the armhole would be, and you can see right now it's curved. What we're going to want to do is actually, we're going to want to straighten this out a little bit. So to do that, we can use a ruler if we want, make sure it's nice and straight. We can draw that in, and we just want to draw it back to this this point of the sleeve here so that we won't have any more curve. And we'll trim that nice and straight, both of the layers, front and back. So now you'll notice that we have one edge that's straight and we have one edge that has the armhole in it. So if you want to, this project can be layered up, so you can actually take this and straighten it out too if you want. For this project, I have not. I don't find that this, when we go to the end of this project, that it's going to make a big difference in how the fringe looks. So I'm just trying to keep it quick and easy. But again, you can take this to the next level too if you want, and you can cut this out and make two nice rectangular panels. So we've got our shirt here. We've got another shirt. We're going to put two shirts together. I'm going to show you on another shirt how that's going to look. So basically, you're going to take this shirt here, and with the second shirt that you have, you're going to line up the straight edge with the straight edge, and you're going to stitch it together. And this is how it will look. So we've got a shirt here, and you'll see that I've picked a couple different stitches. This is how it's going to look. I've got my straight edge here that on this side, I use my machine to stitch. So here's one straight edge here. You can see that the area where the arm side exists is right here. And again, if you were to cut this off, you would actually have two straight panels if you wanted to do that too, which would be 4 seams. But for this one, I'm just doing 2 seams. So I've got one here that I did with the sewing machine, and I've got another here that I've joined together with my favorite stitch, the blanket stitch. So you can decide which stitch you want to use. You can do it by hand or by machine, both a possibility with this project. So now I'm going to start making the fringe. And what I'm going to do that is I'm going to, again, keep in mind where the seam is, and I'm going to fold it so that the seam, which is open here, you can see, is going to be touching the other portion of the seam here. So I'm just going to fold it like this, and I'm going to fold the thing entirely in half and try to smooth it out as much as I can. So what I've got here is I've got this folded in half, and I want to get all the raw edges on the bottom touching as best as I can. So once I have this nice and smooth, then I'm going to start plotting out the cuts, and I'm going to make the cuts happen. So what you'll notice here is that you've got your raw edges on the bottom, and they're fairly straight, touching. And you have the folded edge on the top. The folded edge will not be cut. We're going to be cutting from the bottom up a portion. So just make sure that at this point you take great caution to smooth out all of the layers of your fabric. I'm going to be doing all 4 layers of the fabric at once just to save a little bit of time. You can decide if you want to go layer by layer to do this, or if you want to do them quickly the way I have to. Once I've assessed that the folded edges are straight, I will also keep in mind where the seams are. And if I feel like it needs a little trim, like if it's a little bit off, I can do that with my scissors right now too. So down here it's a little bit off. I think I'm just gonna straighten that out a little bit here. And you can just do that by eye. And again, I'm gonna do that right here. Just to straighten it up a little bit. I don't know if that made it any better, but I like to think it did. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab a chair and we're going to be doing the cutting portion. So now you can decide where you wanna start. If you wanna start at one end or the other, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to start at this end right here. And you can decide how long you wanna make your fringes and how wide you want to make your fringes. So you don't wanna cut into the seam, but you do wanna cut close to it. And I like to do a fringe that's maybe the width of a finger. So if you have a ruler, you can measure out how wide your finger is. And you can also decide how far up you want those fringes to be. So for me, I'm gonna do a medium fringe, and I'm gonna measure up from the bottom. I'm gonna go, let's go 8 inches. I'm gonna get close to this seam here. This might be the one that's the thickest of the fringe, and I'm going to draw on it with the chalk. And I'm going to cut. For this first one, I would suggest just going through all the layers carefully if you can, without cutting the seam. And you're going to cut all the way up here. So then I'm going another finger's width, and I'm going to be doing another line like this here. If you're worried about the fringe being too thick or too thin, you can use a scrap piece to decide how wide you want your fringes to be. Sometimes it gets a little bit off here. You'll repeat this process for the length of your scarf. If you have a rotary cutter at home, that can make this process a little bit quicker. After you've done all your fringe, then the final step will be to pull on what you've cut. And that will cause the edges to curl up, as you can see. Also, washing this after you've done it will do some fun things too, so try that out too. Give it a launder. And you'll go piece by piece and you'll tug on what you've cut, which will create these nice rolled fringy edges. Now imagine if you had a t-shirt that was colorful, how that might look. Or imagine if you dip dyed these afterwards. Imagine how that might look. There's so many possibilities with just 2 t-shirts that you have from your closet. You can turn it into something entirely new. A t-shirt transformation, if you will. I think this is the most fun part. Thanks for watching. Feel free to share any work inspired by this project. And until next time, it's Art in Action.